Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast. I'm the Diggity Doodah, Dr. Papatoi Panther, Mr. Slippers, here to talk a whole bit of basketball with the wobbly wildcard. Wildcard, what's crack-a-lackin'?
Well, it's been a nice eventful 24 hours in the old basketball media realm for myself, so lots actually is crack-a-lackin' at the moment.
Lots and lots and lots. We got it popping like popcorn. The wildcard's going to break down the latest out of the Aotearoa breakers and possibly pull the curtain back on a couple of things there as well. And then we've also got the Tall Blacks, who are in a far better position as we speak. They have wrapped up their FIBA World Cup campaign, and they finished as one of the best 20 basketball teams in the world, which, to my eyes, only reinforces why New Zealand is the greatest sporting nation in the world. Obviously, that comes with the old kg for kg, given our population base, but if you allow me to just go down this tangent, Wildcard, we've got a whole bunch of teams and athletes and competing at extremely high levels around the world, and no matter what sport it is, there is a Kiwi team or there is a Kiwi athlete who is among the world best, and we just happen to have a basketball team that punches well and well and well above its weight on the world scale. They are one of the best 20 basketball teams in the world. Basketball pretty much second to football as the biggest sport in the world, and Aotearoa does a fantastic job at an international level. And then you also look, we've got players like Steven Adams in the NBA competing in the best league in the world, doing a great job representing Aotearoa. So just wanted to kick this basketball podcast off in that manner, because regardless of the sport, across all sports, in fact, if you add up all the achievements, how we operate on a sporting landscape around the world, Aotearoa is the best sporting nation in the world, kg for kg. No one in New Zealand is going to argue with me. Anyone internationally can argue with me, and I'm just going to pull up the long list of fantastic teams and athletes that come from Aotearoa and perform at a high level internationally.
Yeah, see, now if you can just explain this to the Breakers ownership group, that would be great.
Oh, Wildcard, you've set it rolling. What's the deal with the Breakers? I believe old Dillon Boucher's the latest victim with the Breakers. Now, you've got a lot of different nooks and crannies, avenues to explore with this, but just tell me why Dillon Boucher has left the Breakers. It seemed as though he was going to be the link man, the connection between the old Breakers whānau and then the new ownership. He was going to help facilitate the new ownership group to wiggle their way through this landscape. And now Dillon Boucher's gone. Dillon Boucher did go to Papatoi High School, didn't he, Walker?
Yeah, he did.
So a bit of Papatuto, South Auckland represent. But what's this Dillon Boucher situation? Just strictly with Dillon Boucher. Why has Dillon Boucher no longer the boss man of the Breakers?
So the short answer there is we just don't know. Like, we don't have a clue, because he spoke to just one media outlet, and it wasn't even Sky Sports, which is weird because they're the naming sponsor of the Breakers, so you'd think they get first dibs on that kind of thing. But nah, there was, I think TVNZ broke it, and he spoke to them briefly. There was like a 15-second clip of him saying, yeah, well, it was not an easy decision. It's a sad day, but I did what I felt I had did what I felt was necessary. It's just time to move on. Whatever. Like, said absolutely nothing of any particular value if you're digging for gold there. And obviously, then Mr. Matt Walsh popped up straight after that, saying, "Yeah, it's really sad that the Breakers have lost one of their most important guys going way back, but we're gonna move on, and we're very excited about the season to come." And what do we gain from that? I have no idea. I still don't know why Dillon Boucher has left the club. And this is the thing that people need to realize when you're running a sports team, when you're running a business, when you're running any kind of organization like that, is when you exist in the public realm. If you don't put the information out there, that's when speculation happens. And so Yeah, the article I wrote was a little bit speculative about these kind of reasons. What I will say is that, like, the optics from where I'm sitting are that, the Breakers have just signed 3 more imports, for example. One of those imports played for Dan Shamir, the new coach slash director of basketball. That's a whole thing in and of itself. And another one of the imports played against him in Israel there, and several times as well. So 2 guys he knew quite well. Chris O'Peck was the other import, that Scotty Hobson and Sek Henry being the first 2. Chris O'Peck was the other guy, so he doesn't specifically have a connection with the coach. I'm just going to call him the coach, okay? Because let's be honest, yeah. So it feels like the coach probably had a pretty significant role in a couple of those decisions. It also seems like the RJ Hampton thing was very much an ownership group initiative. Like, they had the idea. Sean Marion, who's a minority owner who doesn't really have a lot to do on the ground for the Breakers, but he, over in America, he met with RJ Hampton's family, sort of greased the wheels a bit for all that. So that seems like they kind of came up with this. Well, they haven't really signed anyone from New Zealand other than Rob Lowe, who was a former player who was already moving back to Auckland for family reasons, apparently. I'm not sure if that's 100% true, but that's what I heard. And Tom Vodanovic, who's graduated from being a development player. So it's not like there was much scouting of the NBL, the local league, or anything going into those decisions. They've lost a couple more Kiwi players. They've replaced them with just random overseas guys. Terry Lee doesn't make any sense for someone like Dillon Boucher to have come up with, someone who's, familiar with the Kiwi basketball scene, invested in the Tall Blacks and all this as well. Like, just taking up a development spot to give to a young Chinese national who has hopes of going to the NBA someday, like, that just doesn't make sense. And it's giving one of the last roster spots to a Sudanese, Australian, Lebanon international, I think he is, Aotearoa. Like, it just doesn't seem like Dillon Boucher was really having the kind of say you would expect a general manager to have. And this is not saying that he wasn't in the conversations or anything like this. It just doesn't seem like he was pulling all the strings in the way that, like, Sean Marks gets credit for doing with the Brooklyn Nets, which obviously is not true because it's always a team decision and everyone gets a bit of a say, but it just doesn't feel like he was the man calling the shots there. And whenever there's a media opportunity, whenever there's a player announcement, the coach announcement, all these kind of things, it's not Dillon Boucher who's popping up in the media more often than not. It's almost always Matt Walsh, the owner there. So if you're not really doing the job you expect to be doing, and it doesn't help that since then they've come out and said, like, well, we're not going to rush to appoint anyone new. We can probably absorb this role within the organization. And I pretty immediately, red lights flashing off on the side of my vision there. Well, haven't they already done that though? Like, let's be honest, haven't you already kind of absorbed his role? So yeah, it's not a surprise that he left, and that's probably the saddest part of it, to be honest. But ultimately, we don't really know why he took this decision, but the timing of it, considering, and the optics, considering all the other things that have been going on in the Breakers at this period of immense change, it's not a great look, is it?
You tell me, Wildcard. What is your...
Well, I'm telling you it's not, yeah.
Yeah, what is your vibe coming out of the Breakers? And I would like to say, just on a spiritual tip, there's a lot of craziness in the atmosphere at the moment. There's a lot of change. There's a lot of just weird energy floating around. So with that in mind, that kind of context, I'm not surprised to see this level of overhaul at a club like the Breakers, in the sense, I guess, that this is an organisation that has been operating a certain way for a long, long time now, and with that energy in mind, those kind of old structures, those old ways of doing things that might be right or wrong, however you view it, are being changed. They're being altered as part of a greater shift in the world. So I do think that this fits into the whole period of change and mayhem that we're going through, right or wrong. But yeah, what's your vibe coming out of the Breakers in terms of all the... You don't have to go into specifically all the moves that have been made because you've documented that whether it be on our blog or in podcasts. But the culmination of all those events, like what's your vibe of just what's happening at the Breakers, and just what's your vibe, and then we'll come back around. Just don't go deep into this idea if you do get there, but I am curious, and I will ask you afterwards about how it sets up them for the actual on-court antics later on. But just here right now, what is your vibe of everything that has happened and the culmination of all those events under the new ownership group?
Right, so my vibe, so I would say my vibe is that we've got some new owners who have come into the club and have taken over things, and they've put some money into things, and that's sweet, and they're allowed to spend their money in the way that they want. That has coincided with a very drastic change in approach from the Breakers, and you've got an American ownership group who are very focused on the American way of doing things, which is very kind of like all or nothing, surface level, glitz and glamour, big hype kind of attitude, compared to the Breakers, who are very like community orientated, the way they were running things before, kind of like a family type club. And yeah, it's been a bit of a drastic shift. What that's led to is the whole RJ Hampton thing, for one example, which is probably the best example of the way to turn that hype into something substantial. But yeah, I will admit I was a little bit skeptical from the start, not because I don't trust RJ Hampton, because I think he's going to be, he might have some, we don't know, he's like a bit of a guinea pig for this type of like skipping out on college experiment sort of thing, certainly for a guy who is of like that caliber of prospect. So we don't know if there'll be some learning curves, him playing against professionals in a professional league, big ass Aussie battler types, and coming up against them every game. That's not easy. Not easy for a 18, 19-year-old American lad, however old he is. He's used to playing against guys his own age and whatever. So yeah, that's the thing. But he is supremely talented, and some of the videos we've seen of him, a little highlight, his little shimmy and the way he can get to the hoop, like he's supremely talented, supremely athletic, and pretty excited to see how he goes. But that's a 1-year experiment, right? Next year he's gonna be in the NBA somewhere. He's gonna declare for the draft as soon as the season's over. He's gonna go do all that stuff. Where does that leave you as the Breakers? It's tricky. It's hard to say. Whether do you find another next star or whatever? Like, what's the next situation? And they've signed 3 imports who are as good as they've ever had, I think. It's at least on paper. Like Scotty Hobson in particular. Scotty Hobson was playing for a invitational sort of G League type group against the USA national team just a couple weeks ago, and they bloody whooped their asses in a 5-minute scrimmage that was open to media, and Hobson played a big role in that. So I'm more excited for him than RJ Hampton, to be honest. I think he's going to be incredible for the Breakers. But there's a lot of pressure on them because the big hype, the big focus of recent times has kind of also coincided with eroding away their connection to the history of the club, and guys like Paul Henare, guys like Dillon Boucher, guys like Mika Vukona, Alex Pledge, Shea Illy, important people in times recent and old, and Kevin Braswell as well, who have left the club since the new owners took over. That's not a coincidence, and it's understandable that owners would want to shape their own, put their own shape to things, but you would expect more of a connection with the fans and the club's existing way of doing things. Otherwise, you've just basically bought a club and had a big old clear out, and I'm not a fan of the way that they've done it. It seems pretty heartless. It seems pretty soulless, I will say, is a very good word for it. But if they win games, they'll get away with it, and that's fine, because that's exactly what they've positioned themselves to do, is to try win a lot of basketball games by whatever means necessary, play really exciting basketball, and if they do that, they will probably still get crowds, and it's no big dramas ultimately, like on a bigger scale. If they fail to win, I think it's going to get really ugly really fast, because they're not going to have, they've cut the connection with the local fans that they had. So what are you going to do? Start from scratch? That's not easy to do. Like, there's a lot of pressure on the Breakers right now to be a successful winning basketball team, which they weren't that last year, but I don't think they were terribly far off. But so much change going on at the moment, you don't even know what to think really about them. And yeah, I wonder how some of the Kiwi guys who have been at, like Tom Abercrombie, who's been at this club for so long, I can't help but wonder how he's feeling about everything that's going on. Like, obviously he's never going to come out in public and say anything, because you don't do that. That's bad form. But yeah, it's got to be a strange situation. It's just so like the complete opposite of what this club used to be.
There is this underlying kind of narrative about trying to make the Breakers a bigger brand overseas,
which I have no understanding of why that makes any sense. But yeah,
correct. So it's like it's easy to draw the connection between a new ownership group being the big American dogs, and they want to take the Breakers to greater heights in the international market, which makes no sense. Like, there's nothing to gain from that. We're just trying to have the best franchise domestic basketball team competing in an Australian league as possible. There's no requirement, there's no need, there's no real desire from anyone apart from the new people in the organization to take the Breakers to not the next level, but a different level that doesn't appear to have any like great benefits. The best thing for Kiwi basketball is to promote Kiwi basketball from within, and to, win championships with a largely homegrown stable of talented basketball players. Do you catch that same vibe? Like, it's just confusing as to why the Breakers suddenly, well, we know why they have it, but it just doesn't make any sense. Like, no one wants to see the Breakers as a big international brand. We just want to see a good basketball team that represents us.
Yeah, like, do you want this team to be competing with NBA teams for headlines and what? Mate, it's never going to happen. Like, it makes absolutely no sense in that line of thinking, and I just don't get it. It's just too thirsty. It's too like begging for attention from overseas, and it's just this. Honestly, this is the thing that I've been quite pleased that New Zealand football is slowly starting to work their way through. It's like Americans in basketball and English people in football. It's like you're getting like, I mean, the English influence on New Zealand football goes back decades, and that's fine once upon a time. But nowadays, we live in a global world. We can do our own thing. The information's all out there, and the inferiority complex that people have had with football in New Zealand, and just relying on an English person because they have the right accent to be able to sound like they know what they're talking about, and falling for that every time, has been so annoying. And I when I'm writing about this, I tend to call it football colonialism, and I think this is basketball colonialism. I think and it's not even like it's not like it's menacing. It's not like it's the owners have come in and been like, "Now we're going to take your club away from you. Like, you don't deserve this because you're New Zealanders and we're Americans and we know better about this." It's not that. It's like, and it's nothing, ill-conceived or any of those kind of things. It's just that there's a disconnect. There's like such a strong disconnect between fans and this style of doing things, and I honestly think it's not like this is gonna happen, because like I said, they could very well be a supremely successful team and they will be super interesting to watch. But there's a toss of coin, man. Toss a coin. If it comes up heads, this could like crash and burn and go down in flames. And I don't know, because the thing is, when you go all in on that, on taking away like the connection to the community and that kind of thing with a club, which is often what is like, that's the best thing about English football, is how you have like a club for every township, and it's that community that builds around the club that's the most wholesome thing about it. And the Breakers just have kind of carelessly got rid of that because they've got owners who haven't been involved in that at any point. Like, it's not, and I understand how they do that. It's just that it's weird, and it's high stakes for us as well, because this is the only professional basketball team in New Zealand. So, if they'd done this to a random old Aussie club in the same league, it wouldn't be so bad. What's interesting about this is, I was just thinking, as I remembered and I hadn't thought about this for a while. You remember when that was he Hawaiian or something like that, or it might have been American Samoan or something. It was that American billionaire whatever fella who wanted to buy the Warriors a couple years ago.
Yes, Mr. Fale.
Yeah. What did that strike you like at the time? Because it seems it seems to me right now like that was a little bit of a crossroads in history where that club could have gone in the exact same direction as this one, where like just a different value of doing things, and just like that play. This is the problem with the Breakers, is sometimes it just feels like they're a bit of a play toy, like it's playing Football Manager in real life with an actual well, it's not football, but it's basketball, but you know, point taken, like with a real club that has actual fans and therefore actual like consequences to this whole thing. Like when you play I went through a period where I played Football Manager like an addict would play Football Manager. Like you pick a club at the bottom, and then you completely reshape it. You buy all your favorite players. You bring in the coach that you like, or you just be the coach yourself. Obviously, Football Manager, and it's like if I did that in real life, it would actually cause riots. You know, you'd be ripping out the heart and soul of a team, and it sort of feels like this a little bit, where accidentally, but still, like the soul is disappearing from the Breakers because there's just no connection there anymore. And yeah, but it could be a bloody mess. I'll say that. Eh?
Well, just quickly, how do you see this flowing into on-court basketball? Like, do you have some sort of prediction on how the Breakers are? Maybe not a season prediction, but just how do you think? What's your gut feel on how the Breakers are going to start this season based on everything that we have seen over the past few months?
Well, look at the talent they have on offer, considering that Corey Webster's just had an incredible World Cup, which we'll probably come to in a sec. Tom Abercrombie had a couple good games towards the end of the World Cup. Finn Delaney had his best game at the end. You know, there's a couple Kiwi guys from the Tall Blacks there who are looking pretty sharp coming into the new season. You've got an extremely good set of import players. You've got RJ Hampton looking like top 5 pick in next year's NBA draft. Like, the talent's there. What I will say is that so much change in such a short amount of time makes it difficult to get the most out of that talent. And you've also got this situation where you've got new guys meshing with old guys, and so how that goes, like if some of the Kiwi guys just feel like they're out of place. And I've played in football teams where it's been this, like a new coach comes in, brings in new players, and suddenly it's like, all right, this isn't my club anymore. And you just you lose the you lose the focus, you're just distracted by this weird situation you found in, and you're not going to play to your best. So that's a factor that I think RJ Hampton could be a factor as well. Like, as good as he could be, it could also be a distraction, and B, an obstacle, to be honest. Like, I know he's got a minutes restriction in his deal, so he has to play a certain amount of time. Well, if he's struggling and has a bad game, like, how much is Dan Shamir going to feel like he can just, like, chew him up on the sideline, give him a big serving and tell him you got to play better, whatever. It's like, this dude is kind of important beyond the game. So, and this guy has come here as part of an agreement because he is trying to put himself in his best situation to further his career going into the NBA. There's a lot of money on the line. If the difference between being a top 5 pick and late first round or early second round pick, there's millions of dollars on the line there. So that's substantial. That's a factor. And Dan Shamir himself coming in as a new coach, and not a coach who's familiar with this league. I mean, I remember how Dario Kalajic went at the Wellington Phoenix, and it wasn't great. Well regarded, and he's certainly a guy who has the caliber, the resume to be able to be successful here. But that doesn't necessarily mean he will be. He's got to culturally connect with the New Zealand and Australian guys in this team, and with the American types, and you suspect that the American types will come a lot easier to him. That connection there. Also, Corey Webster called him a Jewish Jose Mourinho, and as a Manchester United fan, that was, first of all, a very funny line. Second of all, I mean, I don't want to hear anybody compared to Jose Mourinho for a club I support ever again, because I've been through that, man, and it was not fun. So there's a lot of reasons why they should be a really successful team and could be in for a great season. There are also a lot of reasons why this could be the exact opposite. And, man, I guess all we can do is sit back and watch, hey?
Sit back and watch indeed, as we have been sitting back and watching the Tall Blacks go rather well at the FIBA World Cup. They had a good win over Turkey, 1-pointer, 102 to 101. The leading scorer in that, which I believe was the last game of the World Cup for the Tall Blacks wildcard.
That is correct.
Last game, so the Tall Blacks finished 19th, but you know, they're in that bracket of 16, 17, 18, 19 as the winner of their second stage group. Bit of a complicated format, but whatever, it was generally a good World Cup for the Tall Blacks. Leading scorer in their last game against Turkey was Rob Lowe, the big man, getting a couple of points. And well, a good result versus Turkey wildcard.
Yeah, great result. Fantastic result. Rob Lowe had 17 and Isaac Fotu also had 17. Fotu hit two one little one-handed floater, sort of, dare I say it, referring to the Tall Blacks, Stephen Adams-esque. And then even later on, with about 30 seconds left, he put New Zealand back in front again for I think it was the final score of the game in the end, with a little bloody sky hook, fucking old Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at his peak right there. Clutch finish, and just, man, that dude's hook shot is incredible. Like, it doesn't get better than that. He hardly missed one all tournament. It was superb. And I've loved watching Isaac Fotu over these last couple weeks for the Tall Blacks, and he was fantastic in that game. It was him versus Cedi Osman, who is the Cleveland Cavaliers sort of guard/wing fella, and big fan of his is a guy called LeBron James, who has invited him to some of his summer camps. Used to be a teammate with him, obviously. So, Cedi Osman is a bloody good player, and he scored 30-odd points in that game. And it was like him and Fotu going head to head at the end there. And Osman missed a pull up late right at the end, and I think it was Ty Webster got the rebound, worked out the clock. Tall Blacks hold on for victory. So yeah, a fantastic win against Turkey there. I think what was most pleasing, I don't know what the word is, it's just to say the best thing about it was that throughout this tournament they've relied on Corey Webster just going next level, and he has been. I'll go through his World Cup stats in a sec because they're unbelievable. In this game he only scored 12 points, and that's a solid effort for most. For Corey Webster at this tournament, it was a little bit below par, but it's all good because he still managed to have a big influence with, I think, 5 assists and a few rebounds, and just being a presence on the court. Even though they were trying to get the ball out of his hands, he was still creating offense in different ways. And the breakers, Jesus Christ, what am I doing? The Tall Blacks in this game, so top scorers, 2 fellas with 17. The Webster brothers both had 12. Delaney had 12. They had 6 guys in double figures and 2 more with 9 points. So the scoring was just so well spread out. And in a game like that, like against a better team, against a strong Turkey team, we've never beaten Turkey before. Played them a few times. Ty Webster actually plays in Turkey for Galatasaray, so nice one for him as well to get that one over. And just finding ways to score and getting contributions from so many different guys. Finn Delaney had scored 4 points through the whole tournament, and a pretty, relatively disappointing one for him, to be honest, considering the bloody ladder rise he's been on the last few, the last year, I'll say, probably for him. And then in the last game, reminds everybody exactly what he can do after all, because he scores 12 points, gets a bunch of crucial rebounds. I think he went 6 for 6 shooting. Excellent little performance from him, just getting performances from across the board. All these different guys stepping up, and that just seems like pure Tall Blacks basketball to me, dog.
It does, and it's why Aotearoa is the best sporting nation in the world. If you were, your Corey Webster would be your pick for the MVP type of player for the Tall Blacks?
So, yeah, MVP for sure. Corey Webster, he was not just the best player for the Tall Blacks, he's one of the best players at the whole tournament. Those stats I promised, he scored 19 points against Brazil, he scored 25 against Montenegro, 31 against Greece. Japan, he was just off the chains good. He scored 27 points on 9 of 11 shooting, so 27 points on 11 shots is something special. And then against Turkey, he got 12 points. So all up, he shot 54.2% from the field at the World Cup. this is all 5 games combined. He shot 54.5% from 3-point range, which is like insane, and then 92.3% from the free throw line, just in case people thought they could foul him and slow him down that way. So it's just like throughout the whole tournament, he's been one of the top scorers. I think he got pipped by a guy from South Korea right at the end there. Obviously, there's still the quarterfinals. I haven't checked the stats since the first couple quarterfinals, and there's the semis and the final to follow on. The big dog's still going at it. But yeah, the fella from South Korea who finished ahead of him in scoring had 1 more point and took about 20 more shots. So yeah, that more or less sums up exactly not just how good and how like the volumes that he was scoring at, but how efficient he was. And it's not just that as well, because he was also averaging more than 5 assists a game and 4.6 rebounds a game, 22.8 points, 4.6 rebounds, 5.6 assists per game. So he was just like next level. Doesn't even sum it up. He was the level beyond that.
And is there anyone? Yeah, but it's quite slightly more interesting award. Is there anyone like a undercover standout from the Tall Blacks World Cup campaign?
Well, if Corey Webster was 1A, then Isaac Fotu was 1B. He wasn't too far behind, and like just being a consistent scorer all game, in each game, and just being a fantastic presence on the court for the Tall Blacks. But I mean, that's an obvious one, isn't it? So I want to chuck out Rob Lowe. I'm going to chuck out Rob Lowe. So he, this is from the article that I wrote about it, rather than paraphrasing myself or just read the things. When Rob Lowe made 2 or more triples in a game this tournament, which happened 4 times out of 5, he had a positive plus minus, and he scored in double digits each time. The one game against Greece where he didn't deliver on that, he fouled out late with a -5 on court, and the Tall Blacks lost. So when he was making multiple 3-pointers, and he shot them pretty well over this tournament, like it makes such a difference, because your big guys knocking down 3-pointers, you stretch the court out, just like getting defenses, playing on those edges, making room for guys like Shea Ili, guys like Ty Webster to make their way to the hoop, to draw fouls, to score layups. It's like it was such a key component of the Tall Blacks. The style of play that they wanted to be able to operate, playing fast, playing downhill, just shooting well. And Rob Lowe is maybe not the first guy you think of in terms of any of those sort of attributes, but he does play a pretty crucial role. And he had some very good games at this tournament. He was excellent against Turkey, and couldn't have done it without him. You can say that about most of those guys in a 1-point win, but couldn't have done it without him in that game against Turkey there.
Lovely jubbly, Wildcard. You got anything else to add from the World Cup, the FIBA Basketball World Cup?
Not particularly. We're recording before Australia's quarterfinal. I would, I'll say this: would you like to see Australia win the Basketball World Cup? Because I'm at a point now where you normally cheer against Australia when you're a Kiwi sports fan, but I don't know. I think I would very much like to see them succeed at this one.
I am definitely in agreement with you, and also notable because you've got a bunch of, like, I saw a list of players who are not in the current Boomers squad, who could be in the Boomers squad. So they're just one of these teams who may be at the Olympics when they're full strength. They could do even better. Obviously, a more competitive tournament with other teams at full strength as well. But this would be a nice jumping point for that. But yeah, with regards to basketball and competing on the international stage, I mean, who else are you going to support? Like, you're not supporting America, all those European countries. Who cares about them? When you have a team like Australia who are probably play basketball in a similar way to New Zealand.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think if you ask a lot of NBA scouts, they probably get confused a lot, and between the I mean, like Aaron Baines is a good example because he's a very Australian type player, but he was born in New Zealand, so you get people thinking he's a New Zealander sometimes because they've like looked up his like basketball reference page or whatever and seen a little New Zealand flag next to his name because that's where he was born or whatever. And I think if you look at guys like you look at Steven Adams, for example, and guys like Joe Ingles and Matt Dellavedova and even Patty Mills, I think these are all extremely different players, but I think a lot of NBA type folks would tell you that there are a lot of characteristics to their games that cross over, despite the fact that they're all playing different positions and different roles, kind of things. Like, I think there's a certain toughness and determination and team first attitude that they expect from not just Australian players, not just someone like Steven Adams, but Australian and New Zealand players. Like, it's kind of a cliche of the down under brand of basketball, I suppose.
Beautiful wild card. So we got a couple teams representing the down under style of basketball, and then we've got a team from New Zealand that is doing the opposite. So interesting times for basketball in this part of the world. Shout out to Australia. All the best of luck at the World Cup. And we'll keep an eye on this Breakers situation. The Wildcard has written about the Breakers situation, so check that out if you're able to read. Otherwise, you could have listened to it. And I'm sure the Wildcard will keep us updated with any other newsy type of events, but most importantly, when basketball is actually starting to be played. So kia kaha, stay beautiful, support each other, and listen to the next episode of the Niche Cast, where we're going to be talking about the Black Caps T20 series against Sri Lanka. Cheer.